Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into Wheely's absolutely brilliant startup allegory, half-baked product. Look, if you've ever spent any time working in tech, product development, or anywhere even remotely close to venture capital, this story is going to feel incredibly familiar. Like, uncomfortably familiar. On the surface, it's a tale about a scrappy company trying to build industrial ovens. But beneath that, it is a total masterclass in exposing the systemic traps, the compounding technical debt, and the sometimes toxic culture of modern product development. It perfectly captures how a seemingly flawless business plan can slowly, painfully descend into absolute chaos. Let's get right into it. 10%. Our story kicks off with a freshly minted founder who decides he's going to completely revolutionize the kitchen appliance market. Now, he doesn't actually know how to bake, but man, he knows spreadsheets. He runs the numbers and calculates that if he can capture just 10% of Spain's pizza makers and bakers, he'll be a billionaire. 10% always looks so small, so achievable, right? Especially when you're just typing it into a cell on a screen. But as we'll see, this intoxicating illusion of capturing a tiny fraction of a massive market is actually the deceptive catalyst for the entire startup delusion. But to make this grand vision a reality, the founder needs someone to, actually build the thing. Enter the engineer. And the core conflict of our entire story gets set up right here. You have two fundamentally opposed worldviews. The founder lives in a world of pitch decks, market share, and handshakes. The engineer, he lives for CAD files, thermal design, and spending hours arguing on incredibly niche Italian oven forms, which to him are the ultimate source of absolute truth. The founder offers 20% of the company and total freedom to build the perfect oven. The engineer is exhausted from his boring job at corporate oven, so he eagerly signs on the dotted line.
So, phase one kicks off, executing this supposedly flawless business plan. Armed with a ton of passion and a really tiny budget, they set out to build it.
Their goal is to manufacture a vastly more efficient oven using a brand new algorithm that automatically stops the baking process for the perfect result, just based on whatever ingredients you input. 2 months later, the classic minimum viable product, the MVP, is ready to go. They test it out with 5 early adopters. It is a functional oven, but there's a pretty massive catch. 1/3 of the time, the bread comes out entirely burnt or the cake is completely raw. A 33% failure rate. That is literally 1 out of every 3 bakes ruined. But the founder is an absolute master of spin. He completely ignores those disastrous failures, focuses only on the successes, and marches right into a VC pitch. He says, "We have a prototype, we have 5 customers, we just need the money to scale." Nobody bothers to ask if those 5 early customers would ever actually buy the thing again. And boom, he raises $5 million. Ovens Inc. is officially born.
Which brings us to the next crucial phase, chasing the enterprise whale. Because when small, risk-averse bakeries refuse to buy a buggy product, Ovens Inc. is forced to pivot hard.
See, now that they have millions in the bank, they really have to confront why small shops, like say Juan's Bakery, refuse to buy the oven in the first place. For a small bakery, a 15% gain in efficiency just isn't worth the risk. If the oven fails and burns the bread, Juan literally loses his livelihood. Meanwhile, the engineering team discovers something super important. The algorithm is incredibly unstable when it tries to bake everything. But if they drop just one type of dough, like if they stop trying to bake cakes and just focus exclusively on bread and pizza, the failure rate plummets to just 5%. The engineer practically begs the founder to make this compromise so they can ship a product that actually works reliably. The founder flat out refuses. Actually, he gets angry. Why? Because he promised the VCs 10% of the entire market. He can't drop cakes. So the key takeaway here is that the founder is prioritizing VC promises over engineering reality. He isn't choosing between right or wrong, he's just choosing which promise he's going to break.
Back over on the sales side, they finally managed to hook an enterprise giant, Peppa Pizza. But enterprise deals aren't closed over a quick email. The founder flies out, hits it off with the owner, and they take this fateful, lavish trip to Mallorca. We don't really know what happens in Mallorca, but the founder comes back waving a massive deal for an initial batch of 500 ovens. But remember, Peppa Pizza hasn't even tested the oven yet. In the world of enterprise sales, the handshake always comes first. The actual technical requirements, those get figured out later.
So what happens when the handshake precedes the laws of physics? Well, the requirements finally arrive from Peppa Pizza.
And they are an absolute nightmare. Pepe Pizza has custom kitchens, so they need ovens with completely different, highly specific dimensions. Oh, and they also unyieldingly demand a rotating base. That is something the engineers have never built and something that was never ever discussed on the Italian forums. Sales, of course, had just breezily replied to the client, "Yeah, no problem."
The engineer reads this and nearly faints. Changing the physical dimensions breaks the entire thermal design of the oven. He opens up the CAD file and explains that fixing the algorithm and redesigning the inverter for these new sizes is going to take 5 solid months. The founder just looks at him and says, "But this is just changing a number, right?" So what happens next? The infamous crunch. Through lost weekends and Red Bull-fueled all-nighters, they somehow compress a 5-month redesign into a frantic 3 weeks. They deliver a prototype with the right dimensions, but they completely compromise the stability of the core algorithm to pull it off. And that rotating base? They just promise Pizza they'll add it in a couple of months.
And this throws the startup directly into the feature factory trap. Sales has a very dangerous revelation here. To survive and keep manufacturing those rosy projections for the board, they can't just sell the oven they actually have. They have to sell non-existent future features.
Think about it. They sold Pepe Pizza the impossible, and engineering miraculously delivered it in 3 weeks. So why not keep doing it? And so the absurd requests begin to pile up. Sales claims they are losing customers who want special, bespoke features. First, they demand a birthday candle button. The engineer is horrified. It's an insult to the very art of oven making. But eventually he caves. Then someone wants the oven to connect to their fireplace. Then they need a Ramadan mode. It's completely absurd. This is the perfect physical representation of software bloat. Engineering is forced to abandon stabilizing the core product just to build these ridiculous bolted-on add-ons to appease the sales team.
But here is the real underlying tragedy. While the engineers are spending all their time just trying to make these 12 new buttons coexist without short-circuiting, the original MVP problem is still there. Bread and cakes are still burning 10% of the time. Customers are literally returning the ovens within a week. And when a frustrated baker calls in to complain that their entire batch of bread is ruined, customer support tries to retain them by offering them the brand new Ramadan mode button. It's totally disconnected from reality.
Eventually, you reach a point where absolutely everything is urgent. And the boiling point finally arrives when Pepe Pizza comes knocking for their rotating base.
Remember that rotating base? It languished for months because everything else was always deemed more urgent. The founder panics. Every single time they tried to work on that base, a candle button or a fireplace connection jumped ahead of it in the queue. It became the perpetual second highest priority. And let's be real, in a startup, the second highest priority never gets done. So the founder gathers the exhausted team and demands they build the rotating base in 2 weeks. The engineer pushes back hard. They need to refactor the code, the team is completely burning out, Mario needs his promised vacation. But the founder drops the ultimate toxic culture trump card. This is a startup. Startups are built with blood and sweat. Everyone here has to sacrifice. The wildest part? The founder actually believes it, because he hasn't taken a vacation either. He has literally weaponized his own burnout against his team. So they go into yet another 2-week crunch. But this time, the passion is totally gone. It's just paperwork and survival. The result is a disastrous, cobbled-together Frankenstein monster of a feature. The new rotating base requires 3 highly specific button combinations just to turn on, and it turns out it's completely incompatible with every other mode the oven has. But they box it up and ship it to Pepe Pizza anyway, just to meet that impossible deadline. And in comes the devastating climax. Pepe Pizza installs the base and immediately calls back. It doesn't rotate clockwise, we're going with corporate oven. Boom! They lose their biggest, most important enterprise client over a basic, entirely uncommunicated requirement. Somewhere between sales, the founder, and the engineering backlog, nobody ever bothered to write down that it needed to spin clockwise. And the true horror here, Pepe Pizza leaves, sure, but the awful hacked-together code for that useless rotating base will haunt the oven's technical design forever. It's permanent technical debt.
And that leaves us with the inevitable startup cycle. The engineers burn out, they leave, and the founder learns absolutely nothing.
Here is the inevitable aftermath. The burned-out engineers quietly quit. Mario leaves just so he can finally get a vacation. The original engineer stops arguing, stops posting on the Italian forums, and eventually just vanishes with a brief 3-line resignation email. Nobody left dares to even touch his hacked-together code. The founder? He simply blames the execution, not his grand plan, and decides they aren't even selling an oven anymore. He pivots the pitch deck to an intelligent baking platform. And so, the cycle repeats itself.
The founder goes out and finds a new, naive young engineer, fresh out of a prestigious school, tired of working at corporate oven. This kid also spends his nights geeking out on Italian oven forums. And in a moment of just brilliant irony, an old forum user warns the kid, "Make sure you support rotating bases on day one." The young engineer literally laughs at the warning. I mean, who uses rotating bases in an oven? He signs the contract, completely blissfully unaware of the absolute wreckage he is walking into.
This whole story is just a brilliant hardware parable for the software world. It perfectly maps to technical debt, feature bloat, and the massive disconnect between sales promises and engineering reality. So I want to leave you with a provocative question to really think about in your own day-to-day work. Is your company actually building a stable core product that solves a real problem? Or are you guys just desperately adding candle buttons to keep the VCs happy? Think about the oven zinc traps hiding around you right now. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.